get into round 4. So I kick off this round with Kirk Cousins' very exciting pick to kick off round 4.
Jonathan Taylor and Kirk Cousins.
You like that? You like that?
Blake.
It was about this moment where Connor realized how much he hated his team.
Yeah. Oh, completely. I knew I was going to call this draft a sham. I knew I was going to absolutely kill Superflex on every phone call we have in the mornings to Damien. Okay, so Blake takes T. Higgins. Jay, you take Travis Etienne. Lawrence, you take Jahmyr Gibbs, who has a monster ceiling this year. Pete takes Geno Smith. Producer Steven takes Daniel Jones. Everybody's kind of trying to find their QB2 now in this round. Damien goes with Mark Andrews, our second tight end to come off the board. Denny takes DK Metcalf. Pat takes Calvin Ridley. Cris takes Najee Harris. Kyle takes Keenan Allen. And the round closes out with Barry taking Jared Goff.
I cannot believe Jared Goff got to me at the end of round 4. I have Jared Goff as, quarterback 15, but again, this is a quarterback who was top 5 in touchdown passes, top 5 in completion rate, 6 different games with 20 or more fantasy points, which was tied for the 6th most, and as we've talked about with Amon-Ra, so me to be able to stack him with Amon-Ra St. Brown, massive mistake by 11 other people, and by 11 other people, I mean everyone else in the league, including the 3 of you. 7 of his final 8 games in a dome, right, where he plays better, where he is much better, traditionally been much, much better. And so, as we cruise into the fantasy playoffs, just Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just get used to seeing that as you lose this league. Some of you won't make the playoffs, but, Lawrence might squeak in, and so I'm just saying that's what your future is.
Squeak?
Yeah, you're like a 6th seed.
I've
you're
drafted
a 6th seed
2
who gets in on
championship
points.
teams. I've drafted 2 championship teams 2 weeks in a row, Matthew. What are we talking about here? I got Jahmyr Gibbs, baby.
I do like Jahmyr Gibbs, and it was interesting to sort of see how the running backs went. I think if we flash the draft back up for a second here, and we talk about not our picks because we're going to talk about our teams.
Still in round 4.
But I was going to say in round 4, just you start seeing some of the upside picks here,
exactly.
right? So Gibbs and some of the honestly, this is about where the question mark running backs go, right? So Etienne, Najee Harris, we love Etienne. He could be awesome, but he can also lose a lot of stuff. Tank Bigsby looks great so far this preseason, right? Najee Harris at 4'10", don't love that. I get it, you're sort of desperate for running back, but Najee Harris makes me super nervous this year. I'd much rather have Jaylen Warren at cost, right? I do think some of these mid-tier quarterbacks in round 4 are pretty good value. I think Steven getting Daniel Jones at 4.6, Pete getting Geno Smith at 4.5 are really nice values. Because those guys are going to flirt with top 12 numbers.
Yeah, it feels like Geno is one of the more underappreciated quarterbacks in Superflex and fantasy.
He finished 5th
exactly.
among quarterbacks last season. A lot of that was just him staying healthy. But also, Geno has rushing upside, which we're pretty late into the Geno era now in terms of how many years he's been in the league, but there's always the scope that he might just run in a few more touchdowns than you expect.
I will also say, Damien, I like the diversification that Damien's doing here, right? He started off with a quarterback, I forget who, but
Lamar Jackson.
So he gets Lamar Jackson, right? And then he goes Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson in round 3. So back-to-back wide receivers. In round 4, he stacks Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews.
And it's PPR.
So Damien, again, I think also saying okay, there's a kind of a sameness to these quarterbacks. I'm going to wait and fill out the rest of my roster. Let's head to round 5.
All right, Barry kicks off round 5 with Joe Mixon. Kyle takes Deebo Samuel. Cris takes Russell Wilson. Rotopat takes DJ Moore. Denny takes Derek Carr. Denny waited on quarterback quite a bit in this draft. Damien takes Ramondre Stevenson. Steven takes Aaron Jones. Pete takes Amari Cooper. Lawrence, you go with DeAndre Hopkins. Jay goes tight end with TJ Hawkinson. Penn State Blake takes Damian Pierce. And I take Breece Hall to close out round 5. So continue to swing on upside for me. I'm chasing points at this point of the draft. Lawrence, I want to kick off with you because you went quarterback, obviously a sound strategy in Superflex. Then instead of going wide receiver in round 3 or 4 like most people have been doing in fantasy, you went with the top-end running backs. Right. So you take your first wide receiver in this draft with DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, so my receiver room is on life support at this point, so now I'm just going let me get a team's top receiver. Let me get a guy who's been productive. Let me get a guy who's in a system where you've seen that a receiver can get 1,000 yards in it, despite it, leaning on the run game, and that's DeAndre Hopkins, who was wide receiver 7 in his 9 games played last season. So kind of swinging here, but it's still DeAndre Hopkins.
We're going to talk about Danny's draft at some point, which at this point is going completely off
We'll
the
do
rails.
full teams.
No, but you know what? Yeah, we will. But I'll just talk about here's what Denny's doing is he is basically if you're going to try to do something different in a Superflex, right? Which is what he's doing. He's doing 0 QB in a Superflex, which is Denny marches to his own drum. But here's the thing: you can get away with it if you're just like basically quarterbacks. Like I'm just going to get 15 to 17 points for my quarterbacks, and that But if you do that. And you just need to crush every pick. And so he goes Justin Jefferson in the first round. Great, no issue there. He goes Stephon Diggs in round 2. Awesome. Off to a good start if you're going with this strategy. Round 3, he gets Josh Jacobs, which could work out amazing, right? Again, sort of swinging for the fences with Jonathan
JT,
Taylor.
yep.
And I will say I feel better about Jacobs at the moment than I do about Taylor in terms of him playing. Right? Then round 4, this is where it goes off the rails for me. He takes DK Metcalf, and DK Metcalf is fine, right? But I mean, like, I would have rathered some of the, like, I'd have rather, Calvin Ridley went after him. I'd have rather Keenan Allen or Jared Goff, who I got. Joe Mixon, we just talked about here. I would have some of the other guys that went after. I'm just nervous. I prefer Tyler Lockett. If I'm picking a Seahawks wide receiver, give me Tyler Lockett at cost over DK Metcalf.
Definitely.
All right, let's jump into round 6, and I want to continue that lack of quarterback talk with you, Jay, in just a second. I kick off this round with Kenneth Walker after taking Breece Hall. Blake takes Terry McLaurin.
Between the 2 running backs, you've got 2 good knees.
Yes.
It's exciting for you.
I'm going to put them together and get one RB1.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
That's exactly
our
great.
sports science in our fantasy program is
How
way ahead
many
of
yards
everyone
is that put
else's.
together, though?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're in a really good place.
It's really, really good. It's really, really good.
Jay, you take Brock Purdy. We'll revisit that in a second. Lawrence, you go Darren Waller, who's been phenomenal this summer for the
pick.
Giants. Pete gets Christian Watson. Steven takes Alexander Madison. Damian goes with Kenny Pickett. Denny takes Brandon Ayuk. Pat goes with Isaiah Pacheco. That's his ride or die suggestion this year. Cris takes Jerry Jeudy. Kyle takes J.K. Dobbins. And Barry, you take Mike Williams.
Yeah.
So, Jay, you hadn't taken a quarterback since Tua. I believe that was in round 2. But you get Brock Purdy, who, when right and when healthy, you can't ask for somebody to be in a better offense than Kyle Shanahan's.
Absolutely. I'm just hoping that the skill players and Shanahan carry Brock Purdy to a, QB 11, 12. I think that's in the range of outcomes for Purdy. And the problem here is that if I pass on Purdy here, when it comes back around to me, then I'm looking at like CJ Stroud as my QB2 in a Superflex league. So I just needed to take, and if it wasn't going to be Brock Purdy here, it was going to be Kenny Pickett or Jordan Love. And so I just prefer Purdy to those guys. I just think that with the talent around him, he's got potentially a higher ceiling.
Well, by the way, you also have Chris McCaffrey. And you can't often stack a quarterback and a running back, but that's one offense and 2 players that you actually can because McCaffrey is so involved in the passing game, and he's got the ability to catch a 7-yard wheel route and turn it into a 40-yard touchdown. Like, he's got that ability. So I don't mind Brock Purdy there. And I also think you bring up a good point here is that if you decide to pull what we call around here a full Denny, that you can't wait too long, right? Like, there comes a point where you're saying, okay, fine, I'm going to zig where anyone else was zagging, and I'm not going to take a quarterback, or whether it's, whether everyone else is taking running backs and you're doing wide receivers or whatever. If you're zigging where everyone's zagging, at some point, you can't wait too long. You can't get too cute. You know what I mean? And so, you didn't see the value at quarterback there for a few rounds, but I think you made the right move in going, okay, like looking ahead, like if I don't take one here, I'm really screwed.
Yep, and I'm also looking ahead at the people who are drafting when it comes back to me. How many quarterbacks do they all have on their roster? And a lot of those people only had one at that point. And so I just think that it's easier to wait in a way on your first quarterback because in retrospect, Denny taking Derek Carr in round 5 is a better value than me taking Tua in round 2, I think. There's a gap between those two, but I'm not sure it's necessarily round 2 to 5, as opposed to Brock Purdy going here. And if I wait on Brock Purdy, then all of a sudden, you're not that far away from getting into like the Kyle Trask range.
I disagree with you, by the way, on the Tua Derek Carr thing. I think Derek Carr's best case scenario is QB 14, QB 13, 17, 18, maybe. Tua's best case scenario is 3rd best quarterback in fantasy. Right? I mean, Tua's best case scenario is stays healthy all year. Tyreek Hill does 2,000 yards. Jalen Waddle does 1,700.
Right.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, seriously. Like, I'm not saying that's likely. I'm not saying that's the most likely outcome, but his best case scenario is Joe Burrow from last year.
Sure.
Right?
I just think.
And Derek Carr, there's no range of outcomes where that happens for Derek Carr.
Sure, I just think the range between round 2 and round 5, say for a running back, might be between Nick Chubb and Bijan Robinson or like Kenneth Walker. I think that's a bigger gap than Tua to Derek Carr, but that's just me. I'm higher on the New Orleans Saints passing game than most, it would appear.
This
My
is,
love for
well,
Michael
we'll get
Thomas.
to that in a second. You're insanely optimistic on the Saints passing game outside of Chris Olave. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that I agree with that either, just because while I certainly agree with the idea that, the Chubb and Bijans of the world are much more likely to, crush than a Kenneth Walker, if you will, that there's a big talent gap there. But I do think that, especially in a league like this, you have a better chance of filling in those running back gaps because, like we talked about this the other day on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Drafters show, right? I mean, like, Latavius Murray was a top 25 running back for the second half of the season, right? You got 2 really good usable games out of Deion Jackson. You got 2 usable games out of Alexander Madison. Like, running back and wide receiver are positions that you can piece it together as guys emerge, whether it's through injury or playing time or some of these murkier backfields start to, separate themselves. Like, I don't know. To me, I think it's easier to find a running back that's going to pop for a handful of weeks, not necessarily the whole season, but it's easier to find a running back that will be very viable for a couple of weeks than it is to find a quarterback that all of a sudden comes out of nowhere and becomes Brock Purdy, who was usable down the stretch.
Sure. Just the last thing I'd say on that, Derek Carr, QB 17 last year, Tua QB 15. Tua obviously was hurt, but that's also baked into Tua.
Sure.
I believe Tua was QB 10 on a points per game basis, though.
Sure.
When he's
That's
not
a
playing,
fact.
you can replace him.
Yeah.
He did leave games early, so
Yep.
there is risk with Tua. There's no question about it, but
He knows
the
how to
upside is
fall down
massive.
now, though.
He does the stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump
Too
into
soon,
round
guys,
7.
too
Barry
soon.
kicked this off with James Conner. Kyle takes Bryce Young. Chris takes Drake London. Pat takes Sam Howell. Denny goes with
There
Jordan
you
Love.
go.
So now you
that
have
was
some,
the correct pick, by the way.
some QB2s
Jay,
going
the round before
Yeah,
should have
should
been
have
Sam
taken
Howell.
Hal. Right.
Damian takes Christian Kirk. Steven takes Chris Godwin. Pete goes with Cam Akers. Lawrence, you take Michael Pittman Jr. Jay, one of my favorite picks of the draft, you take Tyler Lockett
Finally a
towards
good
the
pick
end
for
of
Jay.
round
That is
7.
a good pick.
Penn State Blake goes with Alvin Kamara. I close out this round with George Kittle. So, Jay, if you didn't take Brock Purdy with the 3rd pick of the 6th round, by the time the draft swung back to you, you most likely would have been out Purdy. You would have been out Bryce Young, Sam Howell, Jordan Love. It could have got really scary for your QB2 situation.
I mean, spoiler alert, but I think the next quarterback taken who was available was Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
At that point,
For
and I'd
perspective.
much rather have Brock Purdy at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, Tyler Lockett, I don't understand. Like we talked about,
I don't
what,
get it
8
either.
touchdowns 5 years in a row, and he's the only quarterback,
He
only wide receiver to do
outperforms
that.
ADP every single year. It's up and down during the season, but at the end of the year, the numbers are always there, and especially with JSN now hurt and hopeful to start the season.
it looks
but-
unlikely now.
Right.
We're skewing that
Price
way.
out of an underdog.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, it took you a while to get to a good pick, but you nailed this one.
Now I'm in the swing of it.
Yeah, now
and
you're-
Michael Thomas is coming up.
I like producer Pete's pick here too in the 7th round. Cam Akers. He waited a while to get his first running back, right? But if you're gonna wait that long, get a guy who's the for sure
Volume,
workhorse
right?
in that situation. Top 5 running back the last several weeks of the season last year.
There are a number of guys sort of in this range that qualify there, right? So I mean, like again, Cam Akers, I agree with you. A very good pick by Pete. James Conner's another guy that again, there's health concerns, and I get that the team's not going to be any good, but James Conner's going to average close to 20 touches a game this year.
Yep.
As long as he's healthy. Like he's all they got at the moment. He's all they got. Pat steal the draft with Sam Howell. A lot of people say, should he have gone before Mahomes? Some people are saying that, yes, but that's who you should have taken, obviously, instead of Brock Purdy. It's who Denny should have taken instead of Derek Carr. It's who Lawrence should have taken
In
instead of
all
Anthony
seriousness,
Richardson.
don't sleep on Sam Howell for real.
Right.
Like,
Thank
for
you.
real.
Finally, some sense
show
on this
some love
table.
for Sam Howell.
I'm a fan of the game before anything.
Yeah.
And we just saw him on display in the preseason. Now it's preseason, but it's better to look good in the preseason than bad.
Would you take Sam Howell over Derek Carr?
Yes.
Oh, because of the rushing, I would too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you don't
I
like
really
Derek
think he
Carr
can
to
run this year.
I'll do
a little bit.
more fantasy points at the end of the year. Sam Howell versus Derek Carr.
do dinner.
That's a
At
good,
that-
that's a good bet. Yeah.
Not at that taco place. We'll do
No,
it.
no, absolutely not.
place that shall not be
somewhere
named.
I can order off the adult menu.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah, come on,
Someone
Derek.
is keeping track of all of our bets, right? Jay and I are going to do dinner together for
Well,
like
they're
2
all
weeks
Sam Howell
straight.
related so far.
I think so.
Your wives are going to have some questions.
They
Dinner
are.
again with Jay? This is the
Again?
5th night in a row.
I mean, you told me that one night in Buffalo, that shower was a one-time thing, but now you guys are
trying
having
every
dinner
restaurant
every
in
single
Stamford,
night.
Connecticut? What's going on?
What's going on?
Round 8, I kick things off with Mike Evans. Blake takes Deontay Johnson. Jay takes Hollywood Brown. Lawrence goes George Pickens. So we have a run of 4 wide receivers in a row there, all with pretty decent upside. Pete takes Miles Sanders. Steven takes DeAndre Swift. Damian goes with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I believe that was before he got hurt ultimately.
Yep.
Denny goes with Kyle Pitts. Pat takes Dallas Goedert, so back-to-back tight ends. Chris goes with Javonte Williams, who is back on the field now. Kyle goes with Rashad White. And Barry, you close this thing out by taking James Cook, who's looked really good for Buffalo this summer.
He really has. Again, just continuing a theme of me crushing this draft
yeah.
like a grape. I think James Cook is massively underrated. I think he's going to have a monster year. He is getting, if you look at sort of his utilization with the first team, it's all small sample sizes, but in the preseason, like, it does not appear that Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, any of the other guys there in Buffalo are a threat to him in any significant way. He's going to be the lead running back. He's going to get 65, 70% of the snaps and the touches on one of the best offenses in football among running backs. I just, so I continue to love getting James Cook here. And it's also, I think it's just interesting, Pitts and Goddard here in round 8. It just goes to sort of show that, like, I think if you're going to skimp on a position, which you sort of have to do in a super flex, especially if you start out quarterback, like, tight end's not a bad place to kind of wait. Like, Dallas Goedert in round 8, I don't mind at all. And, like, whether I don't know how you feel about Kyle Pitts for your Falcons this year, one of the many teams you root for.
Really
Lawrence?
great about him, to be honest,
Well, 10 out of 10.
Really great. But so speaking on the tight ends in this draft, right? Seeing that Kyle Pitts and Dallas Goedert went 2 rounds after I got Waller, I was starting to feel like I could have maybe gotten him around later, but then maybe not. So it's just like, get the guy, because I didn't spend on receivers early. So I wanted to get Waller, who's like, he balling right now.
Waller's got a chance to, he's not going to finish as tight end 1 as long as Kelsey is healthy, but he could be right there with Andrews. I think a healthy Darren Waller has a monster season this year. They're going to be an above-average offense, and he's going to lead that team in targets, receptions, yards, possibly touchdowns.
Already showing it, too.
They love Waller there. He's a perfect fit for that offense. So I really like the Waller pick, actually, because I do think he's a significant cut above some of these other guys.
Lawrence, you get George Pickens in this round. It feels like every time we get a video from Steelers camp, it's George Pickens making a one-handed catch. We know Kenny Pickett is trying to build a rapport with him. I know Deontay Johnson went 2 picks before you, but there's no reason George Pickens can't develop into the number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah,
for the
that
Steelers.
wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh is up for grabs right now. And if Kenny Pickett is to take some sort of step forward, it'll be along with the guy he came in with in George Pickens. So, yeah, we seeing all the camp, the great catches and stuff like that, right? But we'll see a little more targets and a little more intermediate play with him as well.
All right, our last round we're going to show here, round 9. Barry, you take Jordan Addison. I'm surprised Kyle takes Jahan Dotson right after that.
Yeah.
You didn't see Jahan Dotson on the board? This is surprising.
What happened there, Matthew?
I did see
you mess
Jahan
up?
Dotson. I don't think I messed up.
right.
I like Jordan Addison.
All right.
I like Jordan Addison quite a bit.
Chris takes Jimmy G.
yeah.
Pat takes Gabe Davis. Denny goes with David Montgomery. Damian gets Dalvin Cook. Steven takes Evan Ingram. Kind of shows you the value of tight end in rounds 8 and 9. Pete gets A.J. Dillon. Lawrence, you go with Odell Beckham. Jay, you get Brian Robinson. We'll revisit that in a little bit as well. Blake takes Zay Flowers, who looked really explosive the other night. And I close out this round with Traylon Burks. All right, Barry, the floor is yours to explain your betrayal of your commander's favorite, Jahan Dotson.
Why'd you do it, man?
Well, first off, as much as I like Jahan Dotson, again, a lot of his usage in that preseason game came after Terry McLaurin left the game. I think they're going to spread the ball around quite a bit. I think, part of what happens during Sam Howell's MVP season is that he gets everyone involved. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be McLaurin. Some weeks it's going to be Dotson. It's going to be Curtis Samuel. It's going to be the running backs. It's going to be whether it's Logan Thomas or Cole Turner, whoever the tight end is there. I will say this just on a personal level. I don't actually, as much as I hype up the Commanders or the Washington football team, whatever it is, the truth is that I know that I'm always going to be rooting for them, so I don't need them on my fantasy team. And so anyway, I have plenty of Dotson. I'm in a lot of dynasty leagues as well, but I'm a big believer in Jordan Addison. What I've said on this show before is that he's going to be my highest ranked rookie. I then moved JSN over him, and now with the injury, I'm going to move Addison back over JSN. New rankings update coming out tomorrow on Thursday. They're both right there. This is kind of the high upside wide receiver round, right? I looked at Addison at this pick. I looked at Gabe Davis with this pick, who I absolutely love as well. You've got both Baltimore guys going in this round, Beckham and Zay Flowers. So it's really interesting here.
Lawrence, you take Odell Beckham. We had a conversation this week amongst the three of us. Who will be the guy out of the wide receiver room in Baltimore? Will it be Zay? Will it be Rashad Bateman? Will it be Odell Beckham?
I'm hanging on to my Rashad Bateman hope.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's Rashad Bateman for you. I believe Zay for you.
Zay for me.
Right.
Interesting.
Odell.
So I'm going to say Odell, especially to begin the season, right? He's the most proven. He's coming in and he's quickly built a rapport with Lamar Jackson. We saw Zay Flowers make a couple of plays there, scoring a touchdown in the preseason. So this wide receiver room is probably the hardest to call because you have a bunch of, it's like 1A, 1B, 1C situations. So that's why they're all getting picked in the same range.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.